this episode of the Photography News podcast, Kingsley falls over, Will goes Dutch, and Roger comes clean about his 365 project. Hello and welcome to the latest episode of the Photography News podcast. It's the first of 2021. Happy New Year to you all. Hope you managed to have a reasonably good Christmas and New Year, despite the restrictions that we're now all under in the UK, back into another lockdown. As usual, I'm joined by my two colleagues, and in light of the fact that obviously we're in a new year, I thought I'd introduce them in the order of the people who are most likely to have stuck to a New Year's resolution. So, starting with the editor of Photography News, Mr. Will Chung. Happy New Year to you, Will.
And to you, Roger, and to all the listeners, and to Kingsley as well. Yes, I made plenty of resolutions, and so far, so good.
So far, so good. Have you made any photographic ones?
I've made loads, some of which will come out in the course of time, and some of which I will keep to myself.
Right.
As I fall at the various hurdles that will come between me and them during the year.
Fairly cagey, but lovely to have you on board, Will. And as Will has alluded to there, alongside him, contributing editor to Photography News, and the man least likely to have probably even made a New Year's resolution, let's be honest, Kingsley Singleton. Hi, Kingsley.
Hello. It's old.
So come on, you're not a New Year's resolution kind of guy, are you?
Well, you know, I make my New Year's resolutions in sort of October. I think that's more realistic.
I wondered if you'd resolved to actually get out of the car when you drive somewhere now to take pictures. Is that...
I've managed to stick to my. I did make one thing of trying to play piano more often. I know that has nothing to do with photography, but you know.
And how's that going?
It's all right. Yeah, I've played piano every day since New Year.
Amazing. And actually, I can see an electronic piano behind you.
Amazing isn't the word that I or any of my neighbours would choose to use.
Well, lovely to see you again, chaps. It's been a little while since we've done one of these, so hopefully we won't be too rusty and we'll be able to rip through our usual stuff over the next half hour or so. So without further ado, let's jump into what we've actually been able to photograph over the last few weeks. It has been, as I said at the start, a little bit restricting. But Kingsley, have you managed to make something of the lockdown restrictions and actually get out and take pictures?
Yeah, well, I mean, we had some very cold weather, didn't we? I think probably across the entire country, although obviously I only experienced about 20 square meters of it. Although I did get out as far as my car and shot some frost on the metalwork, sort of frosty patterns and things. And I also went to the park and I got some kind of frosty things there, and then also fell over on some sheet ice.
Well, it wouldn't be a photographic foray for Kingsley if he wasn't falling over and injuring himself. Are you largely unscathed from your ice dancing?
Yeah. No, well, yeah, the hip remains unscathed, fortunately. Right. I managed to fall on a padded area of my body. Let's just put it that way. An increasingly padded area.
And photographically speaking, were the results pleasing in terms of what you got? You got the shots of the like ice patterns on your car, and what did you get at the park?
Sort of more kind of close-ups of frost on some of the kind of the leaves and things, but there was a heavy frost across the park, and it meant I tried some landscape things. I'm not sure how kind of successful they really were. The patterns was certainly the more interesting of the things for me, because it was 10-20 minutes of kind of exploration, and like most of these things, the more you look, the more you see, and the more you realize that the way you're shooting these things is kind of going to have a big influence on how successful they are. And things like I was trying to keep the camera perpendicular to the is that the right thing? So sort of flat on to the metalwork. So I got a very flat kind of texture, and I wasn't actually using a macro lens. But despite all the stuff that we've said previously about macro lenses, I realized I don't have a macro lens. So I was shooting at the long end of a 24-70 and just getting these kind of, they were big patterns, so it wasn't really a problem. So yeah, it's just that kind of swirling kind of texture of frost that you get.
Very nice. I similarly obviously made the most of the icy spell that we had, And we were lucky enough in our immediate area to have an overnight hoarfrost. Now, just for clarification, we chatted briefly before we started the podcast recording as to what actually defines a hoarfrost. Now, in my book, basically on the trees around where I live, there was obviously quite a lot of moisture. That was overnight. There was a bit of wind as well, and obviously the temperature dropped quite low. So what we ended up getting was sort of spiky fronds, if you like, on trees and bushes and branches. Is that, now, am I right in saying, meteorologically speaking, that is classed as a hoarfrost? What do you reckon, chaps?
No, it sounds right to me, Roger. I mean, it's quite spiky, the frost, if it's a good one. And it is very, very photogenic. So if you've got some nice conditions, icicles, then yeah, get a macro lens out, use a blue sky if there is one. Yeah, that's a very nice subject to have a go at.
Well, I didn't have the blue sky, nor did I have the macro lens. Apart from that, right. it was all good. So I went more for the sort of slightly larger view. I was out with my my trusty X100S. And I'm still shooting in my square format, the sort of the plan that I was keeping from earlier or late last year, in fact. Yeah, it was overexposed and looking rather nice.
I think you can get that sort of. I mean, if you don't have a macro, but you want to get that kind of very close up, obviously you can use a telephoto zoom, which is going to give you not a macro reproduction ratio at the long end, but something maybe, 3:1 instead of 1:1 or something like that. And so you can still get lots of detail. And obviously, if you're shooting on a high res camera, you can crop in a bit more and make the most of it, can't you? One of the great things about frost I've always found is like the texture that it adds to certainly kind of landscape compositions that have got potentially quite sort of dull foliage in the foreground can suddenly be very interesting looking, can't they? Particularly if you've got all those kind of details being picked out. And if you've got a little bit of sunlight as well, then you get a little bit of backlighting and you get that kind of nice glow to everything.
Which is actually effectively exactly what I got. It was, I mean, I've got a footpath leading straight away from my house, and it was, when you stepped out, it was really quite a nice scene. But actually, ordinarily, it's just a load of, well, dormant trees and some grass, and it doesn't look particularly photogenic. But literally overnight, it was absolutely transformed. And I did have a little bit of backlighting, which is hence why I say I sort of deliberately overexposed to sort of create that lightness and airiness about it. And yeah, I was pretty pleased with the results, to be honest. What about you, Will? Did you get out and about?
Well, one of my resolutions, Roger, as you mentioned them earlier, and is for me to make more of mornings. So generally, I tend to go to bed quite late and miss the morning. So I'm trying to reverse it this year and trying to get out more. So I have been getting out with the camera early in the morning. So at the moment, I've just got a small pouch, and I put in there my Nikon Z7 with a zoom lens. So that's what I've been taking out in the morning. So I haven't had the frost, though, that you guys have enjoyed. I mean, I've had ice, but no frost. But the nice thing I got the other morning was a lovely mist. And the sun was breaking through, and it was quite nice. The only thing that let it down was the fact that, I mean, Kingsley mentioned foreground just there, but the foreground where I was just wasn't that interesting. But I tried to find some young trees and try to get them in silhouette and get them in layered for some aerial perspective. So mist I've enjoyed, but that's about it, to be honest, at the moment. Although having said that, I am photographing, I've just thought of it, you mentioned macro lens there. I've taken up acrylic paint pouring, bizarrely enough. I've never done it before, which is buy different coloured acrylic paints. And I mean, I don't want to go into the process, but you pour them onto a canvas and you move it around the canvas, and a lot of this paint gets spilt into a tray. And the colours, when they mix on this tray, when I poured them off the canvas, because the canvas itself is often a disaster zone, but the colours that it makes in the pouring tray that I use are really quite interesting. So one thing I have been doing, now that you mentioned macro lens, is actually afterwards, when I've done a pour quite unsuccessfully normally, I have all this paint in the tray, and I get the macro lens out, and I start photographing the coloured patterns.
So it's the tray that you photograph rather than the canvas. Why do you? I'm not quite understanding why you put them onto the canvas first.
Okay, well, the idea of paint pouring is you get acrylic paint, and there's many different techniques, but you put the paint on the canvas and you just move it around the canvas. You either use a hairdryer, for instance, if it's a Dutch pour, or if it's a ring pour, you just literally just tilt the canvas. Right. So it moves around the canvas and spreads around. But of course, there's quite a thick layer of paint. You don't want all of that on the canvas, so you pour it off. I mean, it's quite wasteful, and you pour it into this tray. And like I said, when all these different colours all mingle in the tray, they can be actually quite photogenic. So depending on the colours, and that's how I get the macro lens afterwards. I mean, like I said, my painting skills are pretty poor at the moment, pretty unrefined. So a lot of canvases I haven't succeeded very well with in terms of a good result. But the paint itself, sitting in the bottom of the tray, which has nothing to do with the painting, makes for an interesting photographic subject.
I haven't seen these results, but I'm imagining it looks a bit like those oil still life compositions that people do with oil and water, where they put
exactly
coloured cards behind them and things like that.
Yeah, right? Exactly right. Which I've been doing a lot of that as well too. I must get some on Instagram. That will show you. That would explain it.
That will explain it. But I'm also intrigued by the phrase "the Dutch pour."
I was going to bring that up.
Did you say what is? Is
the
this
Dutch pour involves paint and a hairdryer?
Oh right. So
if listeners want to learn more, I suggest rather than bog us down with it, they Google it, because there's loads of great stuff on the web. There's some wonderful stuff being produced, and that's why I got into it. And it's so far I made a mess of the kitchen. Basically,
are there any other pours? National
there are quite a few. I mean, there are many pouring techniques as there are photographic techniques.
Wow.
That gives you some idea. And literally, if you Google it, just acrylic paint pours, there's some wonderful stuff out there.
Fantastic. Well, that's right. Well, as always, Will, you open us up to a whole new.
Sorry, very left field. Sorry about that.
No, it's great. I love it. It's a world that I never knew existed, and now I should. Am I okay? It's safe, I presume, to type Dutch pour into my search engine.
Yes, careful how you spell pour.
Yeah. As Will has already alluded to, we thought that we might talk, given that it's the start of the year and traditionally it's a time to kind of take stock photographically and decide, what you might like to do with your photography going forward for the next year. Now, obviously, we are under certain restrictions, and that might hamper our efforts somewhat. But we thought it might be worth chatting through the concept of shooting one or more photographic projects. Will, I'm going to come to you first on this, because as we've discussed previously, you are very much a project person. So maybe you can tell me why in the first instance you actually do projects. What's the thinking behind actually getting out and shooting one or more projects?
Well, for me, Roger, it was quite simple, and the word project makes it sound very worthy and quite weighty, but actually a lot of my projects are basically series of pictures. And the reason I take these pictures is simply I want reasons to use my camera. It's as simple as that. So there are times when you go to the places, and obviously when you could travel around, you would turn up towns and cities, and often did that. If I went to, for instance, a camera club talk, I would turn up early, and I turn up in an unknown place. But I'll wander around thinking, okay, I've got my camera with me. I always have a camera with me. What on earth do I take pictures of? So that's why, for instance, I gave myself some projects. Like one of them is rubbish. One of them is numbers. One of them is phone boxes. So, and whenever I saw rubbish, I wouldn't photograph every bit of rubbish, of course, because you'd be there forever. But when I saw something photogenic, I thought, oh, rubbish, that can go in my rubbish project.
Right.
So my motivation originally was basically to give myself as many reasons as I could to use my camera. Because we spend all this money on our kit, and if I only photograph things I wanted to photograph, I probably wouldn't use it half as much as I do now. So that was the initial reason, and then I started doing a few things which are a bit more, if you like, more worthy. So I'm photographing the piers around the country. I've got 4 left to do, which is frustrating because, of course, I can't get up to north to Scotland or to northeast England where the remaining ones are. And I've also got a project on the Docklands Light Railway. And basically, there were just things that interested me. And I think if, listeners want to have a go at projects, just think about what interests you to start with.
And are these things, are these projects something that you conceive to have like a sort of a beginning, a middle and an end? Or are they kind of open-ended that it's kind of like, I'll just keep adding images to it?
Well, it depends on the project and how you want to do it, because of course you may set yourself a goal, or a timeline you want to work to. But in terms of my peers project, that was going to naturally exhaust itself after I've done the peers on the National Peers website, National Peers Society website. And I think there were about 58 peers the last time I counted. So that had a number which you thought, okay, I'll finish that. On the Doctors Light Railway, it's a similar thing. I thought I wanted to photograph every station. And I think there were 45 stations the last time I counted. I know these things change all the time. So I thought I'd get there and then I'd stop. But then I actually did carry on because I did actually walk to all 45 stations at one point or the other over the last 2 years. But I just thought with DLR, the Doctors Light Railway, I'll just carry until I'm bored. So it depends on how you want to work. I mean, how organised you want to be and how structured you want to be. I don't tend to be very structured with my project.
So a project doesn't necessarily need to be a straitjacket. It just needs to be something to give you a reason to get your camera out of your bag and take pictures with it.
Yeah, and that's what I would suggest. And if you're new to projects, given the scenario we're in, of course, find something that interests you and find something that's accessible. And then as we go into the year and we get a bit more freedom, then think about further afield, a bit more challenging things, perhaps. Well, whatever interests you. Like I said, I mean, I remember I did some training once, and a chap on the course, I talked about projects, and one thing he started photographing as we walked down the street were drain covers. And I never thought about it, but he was a former engineer, so he was interested in the names of the engineering companies on the drain covers. So whatever turns you on, don't keep the blinkers off. Don't limit yourself. Challenge yourself by all means, but also make it convenient too. So you don't make it so exclusive that you can't do it.
So drain covers, Kingsley. That sounds like the sort of thing you'd be well into. What are your sort of?
It would fall down the drain. That would be his problem.
Drain pipe trousers. That's what I'm going to take pictures of. I actually, while Will was talking about the importance of projects there, I didn't nod off. I was going to say that's just a little joke. The long winter evenings must just fly past, mustn't they? If you live with someone who shoots drain covers. Anyway, I was actually more thinking it was like projects are a great way of giving meaning to your photography, aren't they? And in a slightly kind of sarcastic way, they sort of help you combat the crushing indifference of the universe, don't they? It's like there's a reason.
Somebody's been navel gazing over the New Year period.
I think it's just good to have and I think it's about creating kind of coherent sequences of pictures, because that's quite satisfying when you see things. And we've probably said before, but you go to a gallery and see the way that work is laid out, and there's sort of if people are working on projects, or they have periods of color like painters do, these things are laid out in a meaningful manner, and that's what you can do with your photography to kind of tie it together and give it some purpose.
So have you shot projects in the past, or is like the concept of shooting a project kind of a bit new to you?
I don't have anything quite so sort of I don't have as many projects as Will has. I mean, I did have this long project where I was helping out at a local dog shelter, where I was doing portraits of their dogs for them. And I don't know whether I'd call that a project or whether it was just something that I enjoyed doing. I think in some ways a bit like Will's saying, does it have to be anything more serious than that? Your project could be something that simply that you enjoy. It doesn't have to have a kind of a worthy meaning.
But so, I think that's a project to me. So yeah. I think you shouldn't hide your light under is it push under a light, or the other way around? You shouldn't be so modest, and then actually say I think that's a great idea, and you could expand that and make it something very interesting and worthy.
I mean, that does also tie into the idea of your kind of almost like self-image as a photographer, and the idea that you would like to. I think most photographers kind of want to be known for a particular style or subject. That's why people gravitate into certain areas. And I know like Will is a big exponent of kind of generalism in photography, which I think is really valid as well, because you shouldn't close yourself off from things, but then a lot of people like to kind of be very targeted and kind of specific, don't they? And that can kind of help create that niche that makes you feel comfortable, makes you feel like an expert in something.
So how do you feel about, for example, I mean, as I say, at this time of the year, I'm sure a number of our listeners may have sort of contemplated or even started a 365 project, where it's obviously something where you go out and take a photograph every day for an entire year. Speaking as somebody who has done that, and having mentioned on a previous podcast that it was probably one of the worst decisions I ever made. I don't know about you guys, about how you feel about, because I mean, I think it was kind of the restriction or the fact that I was forcing myself into taking a picture every day that actually ended up being part of the problem. I suppose you by the sounds of what you two are saying, it should be a much more sort of free thinking process that kind of happens as and when.
Yeah, I think the purpose is if anything is to stimulate you creatively and physically, because you're getting up and getting out and doing things.
Yeah.
I think if you're like this, the other thing is there's nothing wrong with stopping doing a project. It's not like a death sentence, and that's the way that I kind of feel about those 365 things. Most people that do them just kind of they become like a drudge, don't they? Like again, like if people, I'm sure that there's an equal number of people that have really enjoyed them and enjoyed every day, but like I would see that as a little bit sort of counterintuitive to having fun and enjoying being a photographer, that you kind of like felt like you had to do something.
Well, and I think that is absolutely nail on the head stuff, in terms of, because you, as somebody who cares about the type of images that they take, you can't just go out and go, oh, here's a picture of my cup of tea, oh, here's a picture of my lunch. I felt very much compelled to actually create something of worth, which I guess is what you guys are both saying, in terms of it's got to have some merit, and you want to try and create something photographically.
Yeah, and I mean, in a way, from a kind of a mental health point of view, that worth could simply be that you're enjoying it. It doesn't, like, I think that's a sort of a two-sided thing. I think as long as you're enjoying it, it doesn't really matter what you take pictures of.
I think that important of enjoyment is really, really key. But if you put yourself under so much pressure, Rog, which sounds like you might have done, that just becomes a chore. It always just put me right off. Especially, I don't know, 11 o'clock at night, you think, oh, I haven't done my picture for my 365.
Yes.
You run around like a mad thing, go into the kitchen and find some pasta to photograph. But there's only so many times you can do that. But you think,
But having said that, but having said that, I did actually create some images which I wouldn't ordinarily have taken. I got out, I thought on occasions, particularly in the summer, I found myself setting my alarm really quite early. I remember one particular morning going out at about 5 a.m. down to a local nature reserve and managing to find like damselflies, laden with dew and all this sort of stuff. And I remember, just think, I mean, I got some really nice pictures, and B, just thinking I never would have done this ordinarily if it wasn't for this project.
I think that's a positive that you can take from it. And even if you get 100, 200 days into your 365 project, if during that time you discover something that you really like doing, then I would say that's more important than taking 365 pictures. If it means that you go back and you invest and you enjoy your time shooting pictures of damselflies. Did you ever go back and shoot more damselflies?
I didn't, but I discovered, I realized something that I really enjoyed doing. I realized I really enjoyed playing golf. That was no, I mean, I wouldn't, this is obviously a photography podcast and I wouldn't want to put people off. It definitely is it was definitely a bit of a voyage of self-discovery from my own perspective. I definitely got to about day 200 and did want to throw in the towel, but actually thought, well, I'm more than halfway now, so I've got to kind of see it through. And I think, as I've mentioned on a previous podcast, I was also putting it up online and actually putting the logic behind what I was doing and why I was doing it on every single day. So it wasn't just taking a picture, it was then processing it, and it was then writing a blog post about every single picture that I took, which again could have been a part of the reason why my wife threatened to throw me out on more than one occasion, because it just took so much time. But there we go. I mean, shooting a project is definitely, I'm up for doing another one, and I think, as we've all agreed, the three of us, we are going to make 2021 the time for us to shoot a project. So going round the room virtually, chaps. Obviously, Will, you are Mr. Project, but we've said to you we need you to shoot something new for 2021. So what is that going to be?
Well, my idea is one I've had kicking around for a while, and it's a throwback to days of yore. And basically, there's an app called Darker, which is spelled without the E, Darkr, which I bought a while ago. And with that, you can shoot in large format. So you can shoot as a sheet film camera on your iPad. So what I'm going to do is, and I've already bought the bracket. I've got an iPad, the bracket to hold it onto a tripod. When I can go shopping and go to John Lewis, I will pick up some black cloth, and this will be my makeshift large format field camera, but with an iPod. Because the Darker thing is really, it's a really neat app. Because what you do is create a negative, and so when you shoot large format, you do actually get the upside down reversed image that you used to get when you shot large format film. And so you compose it with a dark cloth over your head, which of course you don't need, but for the sake of the project, I'm going to put the black cloth over me. And I'm going to rummage underneath this black cloth and take a photograph using my iPad on this app Darker. And this app Darker then lets you process the image, which comes out as a negative. You process it in black and white. You can do test strips, adjust contrast grades. You can burn and dodge. You can use all the darkroom skills, but of course it's on a tablet. And output it. Now, the image, the resolution of the iPad is 12 megapixels. So I reckon I can get some decent sized images from this project. So I'm going to shoot black and white using my iPad. The location, I don't know, I might do around Cambridge actually, as it's fairly local and accessible. I can go there without, even now I can go there without breaking any restrictions in terms of where I can go. So I might even start it soon.
Good for you. Now, we said that one thing we would do is we would make sure that we shared our efforts from our respective projects on our social media, Will. So do you want to remind everybody, or do you need to remind yourself what your Instagram handle
I need to remind myself.
Okay, we'll come back to you on that one. Kingsley, project?
I was for a long time I've been thinking about doing this particular silly type of dog pictures where you take a picture of them eating or drinking, and what you do is you get a glass bottom bowl and you put the camera underneath, and because as anyone who's ever kind of looked up at a dog's face while they're looking down at you, they do look quite comical, sort of these kind of face all sort of hangs forward in a funny fashion. And I think I'm going to have a go at that. And it's a bit technical because I think I'm going to have to kind of, set it up in a certain way and make sure that certain things like focus are right, and maybe even use a bit of flash to try and kind of get the lighting exactly kind of where I want it. And by no means sure it's going to be successful, but we'll see.
And so is this going to be just with your own collection of dogs, or are you going to get third-party dogs?
It is right now. Yeah, I mean, well, right now it will be. I think if I can do it and I can do it well, and I discover things about it that sort of make it work, then I might sort of open it up to others. And I might spend some time doing. Over the years, I've shot quite a few pictures of them sort of catching biscuits and stuff like that as well. So I might, if once I've got the flash stuff out, I might give that a go as well.
And so, where will the listeners be able to view your efforts?
Well, my normal Instagram is kingsley.photo, but I've also got kingsley.photo.dogs, which is where I put all my dog photography. So it'll end up there, I reckon.
Okay. Will, have you found your Instagram handle yet?
Yeah, I am Will Chung Photo.
Will Chung Photo. Well, there you go. So from my perspective, I had a couple of ideas, but actually listening to you chaps, I had a dog idea, and actually it is an idea that I had started, which was photographing dogs with their owners while they were out on a walk. That was one idea, but obviously Kingsley's bags the dogs, so I won't double up on the canine front. I also thought about doing something based around lost property, because when I'm out walking the dog, you just see a lot of stuff just being chucked by not necessarily chucked by the wayside. I've seen hats and gloves and all sorts of things just discarded on the floor, and I thought that might be fun, but that could actually quite quickly get a bit repetitive. So what I've decided to do is I'm going to do something based around long exposures at night. I haven't quite sort of fine-tuned it, but as we've discussed before, I live in the middle of nowhere, so we have very dark skies. And I really got quite into, when I'd worked out how to actually do a decent star trail in terms of remembering to turn off the noise reduction frame in between. I actually got quite into doing star trails and stuff like that. And obviously the discussion we had on the previous podcast about nighttime photography is kind of really sort of wet my whistle for doing more. So I'm going to sort of dig out a flash gun and combine that with some long exposures, star trail stuff, and do some more of that. So I shall share mine on my Instagram handle, which is at Rog Payne, ROGPAYNE. So I'm sure we will revisit this project theme over the course of the next few months on the podcast. But if you are going to have a go at a project yourself, then please do let us know. The best way to get in touch with us is via email, which is on podcast@photographynews.co.uk, or you can also contact the magazine on our various social media fields. Trying to think of the word now. What's the word?
Channels?
Streams, channels. There we go. And the handle for all of those is at PhotoNewsPN. So, talking of photography news, as we should be, Will, I believe you just put a latest issue to print. So, what can the listeners look out for in that particular issue?
Well, a whole list of goodies, Rog, but I'll keep it brief. The first thing is that it's your last chance, our readers' last chance, to vote in the PN Awards. The closing date is the 25th of January, but basically the awards is our way of recognising great product and outstanding service. Our big test this month is the new Fujifilm XS10, which we've talked about before in previous podcasts, which is Fujifilm's latest series of cameras aimed at non-Fujifilm users and also I think people who are perhaps wanting a backup camera as well. I think it's an excellent camera. And you've talked about it with me before, and we've talked about it here, is about super zooms. So I've got a little feature about super zooms and the potential for them, and maybe why aren't they as popular as maybe they could be. And final thing I just want to plug is the fact we have a free tripod to be won. It's a K&F carbon fiber tripod. It's worth 120 quid. You can enter this really simple competition on the website. You just have to answer a question, and then we have a draw of the correct answers in due course. So that's the winner, carbon fiber travel tripod from K&F.
Fantastic stuff. Thanks, Will. The best way to, obviously we are still printing the magazine and sending it out, but the best way, if you can't get hold of a copy through your camera club, the best way to get in to have a look at it is on the website. The URL for that is www.photographynews.co.uk. So go and take a look at the digital issue there. Let's answer some reader questions. We've got a couple sent in. The best way, if you have a question for us, which we would love to hear from you, the best way to get in touch with us is via email, and the address is podcast@photographynews.co.uk. So let's start with this one, Kingsley. I'll throw this one out to you. It is a 3-word question from a lady called Sarah Pearson. She sent this on email, and the question is JPEG or RAW? Kingsley.
Well, it's funny, isn't it? No one mentions TIFFs anymore, do they? Or other things like Targas or things like that. Probably it's just JPEG and RAW. It's like a 2-horse race. I think, for years I ended up shooting RAW and JPEG because I wasn't really. I mean, in some situations, say if you've got some sort of, maybe you've got like a picture style set up. You want to shoot both because you would have, the effects of the in-camera processing on the JPEG, and then you'd have the RAW file to kind of fall back on. Most of the time these days, I just shoot RAW because I think I'm someone who is very comfortable seeing sort of image processing as part of the experience. I'm not someone who kind of wants to get pictures as quickly as I can off the camera and up online or anything like that. So to me it kind of makes sense, and also ultimately it makes sense to have the most kind of processing latitude that you can, and that's what you get from a RAW file. If you shoot JPEG, you are stuck with the processed information, as opposed to the kind of the greater kind of width of and depth of kind of information that you get in a raw.
So you're very much in the raw camp.
Very
Will,
much.
are you alongside him?
Yeah, I think most keen photographers will be in the raw camp. And the thing that Kingsley mentioned is editing, and that's core to this, because if you don't edit and you like shooting in camera and getting it right, using picture modes and film simulation modes, whether to get the effect you want, then nothing wrong with JPEG. And after all, most professionals shoot JPEG. You know, wedding photographers, press photographers, sports photographers, you know, they get everything right in camera, and they don't do all the editing thing because they get it right in camera and it's good enough for them. They shoot JPEG. I shoot now in my cameras RAW only, apart from my Fujifilm cameras, and that's purely because when you zoom into a preview, when you shoot RAW only on a Fujifilm camera, you can't zoom in so much. So you have to shoot JPEG and RAW so you can zoom in more to check out the images and how sharp they are in the first place. So I shoot mostly RAW now, like I said, apart from on Fujifilm cameras, and also, to be fair, apart from when I'm testing cameras, because of course you want to see what out of camera output looks like too, and so good JPEGs are and how clean they are.
I was going to sort of raise that point about, because I think there's a lot of sort of expectation, or not expectation, but there's a lot of talk, isn't there, about, oh, you must shoot RAW. You know, if you're serious, you must shoot RAW. But is there not an argument for just like a personal preference? You know, remember that interview you did with Charlie Waitwill about learning about your camera? Many a podcast ago that was now, but it was all about, is it not all about, you know, shooting JPEG, having a look at the results? And admittedly, you don't have the latitude, you know, in terms of from a processing perspective. But if you might just be really happy with the straight out of camera JPEGs, in which case, why not just stick with those?
No, absolutely right. And like I said, if you want to work to a discipline, I think shooting in JPEGs are very much a good thing. It's you can equate it in some ways to the days of film when shooting transparency film, as you remember, you had to get it right in camera. If you didn't get it right in camera, you're stuffed. And JPEG's similar in a way. And RAW you could equate to being a negative, because, you know, when you shot color negative or black and white negative, you had flexibility because there's another stage you could work in. But with JPEG and stroke slow film, you couldn't do that. So it's a good discipline of shooting JPEG. And if, you know, I think if you want to explore this film simulation modes, that's a good thing. And of course, if there's one reason you want to set JPEG as well as RAW on your camera, is if you, for instance, we talked about it before, you know, you want to learn about black and white photography, for instance, shoot one of the JPEG mono modes, so you get the preview of the mono image on the back of your camera. So it's a good way to learn, but naturally nothing wrong with JPEGs. Like I said, there are many people earning lots and lots of money shooting JPEGs, thank you very much. Nothing wrong with them at all. So just, I don't know if there is a stigma about shooting JPEG. There shouldn't be, but if there is, then we need to get that sorted. Just produce images how you want and what you intend to do. So with RAW, because the images do come out quite flat, you know, the editing process is fundamental to getting the most out of RAW. So, you know, whatever you want and how you want to work it.
Kingsley,
you want to stay awake.
I think it also depends on the subject, doesn't it? It's like you're saying, because I generally would shoot outside a lot, shoot landscapes or shoot portraits outside, shoot pictures of dogs outside. You're not in control of lighting, and therefore the extra versatility of a RAW file is really helpful, because you can end up kind of crushing highlights and boosting shadows a bit, which arguably you can do with in-camera settings, but you may want, you know, a different level of that kind of those kind of settings between different subjects. If I was in a studio, or when I'm working in a studio and I know my lighting ratio, I might very well shoot JPEG, because I know that I'm not going to be, you know, facing the same kind of latitude in lighting.
So I think generally speaking, in to answer to your very simple question, Sarah, I think the general feeling here is that you've got Will and Kingsley who are largely shooting RAW only. I suppose I didn't throw my two penneth in, which was I shoot RAW and JPEG. I'm actually the same as Will, largely using a Fujifilm camera. And actually, when you stick the two files side by side in Lightroom, you can really clearly see how much more detail you get in a raw file. But I wouldn't particularly ever like to fly by the seat of my pants and just shoot JPEG only, unless of course I had a particularly small card with limited storage on it. But I don't think that you don't get many of those these days. So I think generally, Sarah, largely either a bit of both or just raw, to answer your question. So let's move on to the second one, which I feel could be a lengthy discussion as well. This comes from Steve Dudson in Carlisle, and he says, I've switched to mirrorless from my trusty DSLR, but I'm alarmed at how much quicker my battery drains. Do you have any tips to extend battery life? Now, Kingsley, you, like Steve, have recently switched to a mirrorless model, haven't you? Although you haven't sold your DSLR, I don't think, have you? So are you finding this same sort of transitional surprise in terms of that you're chewing through batteries a bit more quickly?
I wouldn't call it a surprise, but I sort of knew what I was getting into, and I think that's probably the place to start with this, is that you're dealing with a sort of a different animal here. Mirrorless cameras are by their nature more power hungry because you're running an EVF as well as a screen, whereas using an optical viewfinder isn't going to take very much power at all, is it? Aside from that, if your mirrorless camera has got in-body image stabilization and that's active, that's going to be using power. And there's a bunch of other sort of clever things that it does that are going to be using more power as well. So I think it's kind of, to me, the answer is probably less about trying to save power and more about guarding yourself against running out of power, and that would be just to face up to the fact that you're probably going to have to buy some more batteries.
Right. Okay. But there must be functions on your camera that can be switched off. I mean, you've touched on bits and bobs there, but things like using the EVF rather than the rear LCD. So switching the rear LCD off. We talked briefly, didn't we, about prior to recording, we were talking about the fact that your Nikon camera's got a low light AF function on it, which if that's active, that chews through battery power. I mean, there must be other stuff on other cameras, Will, that are equally sort of power hungry. Is that true?
Well, that's true, and obviously things like the EVF on many cameras has different refresh rates, and the higher refresh rates will chew through more batteries. And I mean, one thing I do when I go out shooting is often turn off the preview mode. So when I'm taking pictures, I just think, well, I've got it. I won't bother looking because it chews up battery power. But I'm very much like Kingsley. I've just embraced the fact that when I use mirrorless, I am going to go through more batteries. And I just bought a couple of third-party spares. And when I go out nowadays, even for my misty morning walks, I've got a spare battery in there just in case. To be fair, I'm not going to do that many pictures on my morning walk, but you never know. I just like to be prepared. I'm a bit of a Boy Scout in that respect. But with street photography, when I was doing it, I'd be walking around with the camera powered up the whole time, because you're in a situation where you think, oh, a picture could happen any time. I don't have to worry about turning the thing on and waiting for the thing to start up before I can take shots. So I'd walk around with the camera powered up all the time. So I knew every, a couple of hours I have to replace a battery. I've
personally always steered clear of buying third-party batteries. I mean, do you find that they do offer a similar or comparable performance, or is there an expectation that those themselves won't be quite as good as the actual manufacturer's own battery?
Yeah, to be honest, Roger, you're absolutely right. Some of the third-party batteries aren't that great. I generally, before I buy, I just look at the reviews, and if they've got some bad reviews from consumers, I think, okay, I'll just go around those brands. And I've alighted on a couple of brands now, and now I know which to go for. But you have to accept the third-party batteries will not be as good as those ones from the camera company. But often it's just having a little bit of extra oomph when you're out and about. And of course, the other option is nowadays is that many cameras allow you to charge through their USB socket. So if you've got a power bank, and many of us have power banks now for our phones and tablets when we're out and about, just have a spare cable for the camera as well. And if you're desperate for juice, then just plug in the power bank as well and top up the battery if you can.
And it's definitely worth delving around in your camera's menus, especially if you've recently invested in a camera, Steve. It might well be that there are some battery saving features. I think, Will, you mentioned earlier that some of the new Canons have got like an eco mode, which may very slightly drop performance, but does help with extending battery life.
Yeah, and you guys as Fujifilm users will know that there's a boost mode on many, if not all, I think, Fujifilm bodies. And in my experience with those cameras, isn't it like by default it's set up on one of the directions of the D-pad or something like that, and so it's the sort of thing that you might actually turn on and have running without even knowing it.
Sure. And the other thing to consider as well, which is not exactly the most elegant solution, but if Steve doesn't actually mention which camera brand he's bought, but always considering a battery grip. So you've got on Fujifilm cameras, or selected Fujifilm cameras, you can buy vertical battery grips, which obviously mirror the handling, depending on which orientation you've got the camera in, but also house a couple of batteries. So it kind of massively extends your sort of shooting capacity. So hopefully there, Steve, a few ideas. So basically, have a delve around in your menus. Consider buying some additional batteries. And actually, my own personal thing is, I know Kingsley and Will haven't mentioned it, but I actually do turn my camera on and off like almost all the time. So in between shots, I will just flick the camera off, and I just get used to sort of flicking it back on again. I'm assuming that the actual process of flicking it back on doesn't use more battery power, but I've just got used to that as part of the way that I shoot. But yeah, there's plenty of solutions there to getting a little bit more battery life. So I think that's just about us done. But we wouldn't obviously finish this first of a New Year's podcast without a Will's word of wisdom. So Will, what have you got for us for the new year?
Well, I think as we were talking about projects earlier, this can be kind of a project. It's kind of training your vision, training your eye, learning to use your feet. And one thing I suggest to people on this one is go out with just one focal length. And what I mean by that is literally just take a standard, a prime lens. You can go for a wide angle, or in Kingsley's case, a 300mm, whatever it might be. Or if you've only got a zoom, get some sticky tape, stick it on one particular focal length, and just get to use and learn how to use that and how to see with that one focal length. It's a great way of training your vision. And I think that's in the context of what we talked about with projects, you can make it a project as well. So yeah, use one focal length. Make your picture better that way. Train your vision.
Now, as regular listeners to the podcast will know, Will has been advocating up until now the use of super zooms. But as you will now have been listened to, everybody, Will really is, deep down, we knew it was true. He really is a prime lens man through and through. Isn't that right, Will?
It is true that I'm still very, very fond of primes, Rog. I still like using my feet. It goes back to, when I bought my first camera, it came with a 50mm f1.8 lens, and that's all I had. I couldn't afford another lens, so you learn to make the most of it. And I think that restriction is a good thing, really is a good thing.
And I'm sure, no doubt, that Kingsley, will be jumping on your piece of advice with his 300mm and driving around his local streets and staying firmly put in the driver's seat to capture all sorts of images. Isn't that right, Kingsley?
Well, I was going to suggest at the same time as we were saying that about kind of quite often I use my phone when I'm out just to kind of like work out compositions of things that I see. So like I happen the iPhone I've got has got like a 10 times zoom in or something, and it's absolutely rotten when you get to the long end of it. But what I've equated is that the long end of that works out to about, I think, something like 250mm equivalent or something like that. So what I can do is I can see something and I can have a quick play with it and I can work out, hey, that works, and I can come back with my proper stuff, my proper 800mm lens. And the other great thing about taking pictures with your phone, obviously, is you can hold a bottle of wine with the other one.
When we all do actually finally get back together, don't bring your camera kit in, Kingsley, because I'm going to super glue that 300mm to your camera and make you stick with it for the rest of your photographic days. So excellent. Well, thanks for that, Will, and thank you Oh, Kingsley.
Well, I was just about to say, actually, 300mm lens is a great way to social distance, isn't it? 'Cause you can't focus within about 2 meters anyway.
Well, there we go. Top tip. It's a Kingsley top tip, a Kingsley word of wisdom to end this first podcast of the new year. We hope you've enjoyed it. We hope you can still enjoy your photography, get out and take some pictures. And certainly if you maybe pick up some of the advice we've extolled about shooting projects, you might actually have a few thoughts that you can go out and get shooting with. So that just leaves me a very quick thank you to the editor of Photography News, Mr. Will Chung. Thanks very much, Will.
Pleasure, Rog. Nice to see you again, Kingsley. Take care, everyone.
And obviously, as aforementioned, the contributing editor of Photography News, Mr. 300mm himself, Kingsley Singleton. Thanks, Kingsley.
Thanks, then.
We will see you again. We're going to be back to doing these in every couple of weeks. So we'll see you again in a couple of weeks. Cheers now. Bye. Kingsley, I'm going to come to you on this. It's a 3-word question that comes from a lady called Sarah Pearson on email, and the question is JPEG or RAW? Oh, sodding dog!
I can hear what Leo thinks of it.
I don't know what's going on. Hang on.
Raw.
Raw.
Raw.